Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mariah and I talk about books here. So today we're going to do our May wrap-up. May was a very productive reading month for me. I read 11 books total with one DNF. So let's get started with these books in chronological order. First I read Alison Dead by Joseph Fink. Alison Dead is a book written by one of the co-authors of the Welcome to Night Vale, the podcast and now book series. It tells the story of a woman who is looking for her wife, and along the way finds out there's a bigger conspiracy going on, and she has to deal with her almost crippling anxiety. As somebody with really bad anxiety, I really enjoyed the anxiety rep in this book, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The second book I read was All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. This is the Alchemist edition, and I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. It tells the story of Amora, who is the princess to a kingdom, and on the eve where she's supposed to show her power to the kingdom, she ends up failing in a way. And she ends up having to be taken in by a pirate named Bastion, her fiance, and they pick up a mermaid along the way, and they have to essentially save the kingdom, find out what's going on. I hated the first half of this book. It was another one of those cases where I hated the first half of the book. I didn't think I was going to finish it. Ended up really enjoying it. I gave it, like I said, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. My biggest problem with this book was not so much the writing. The writing is beautiful. It was Amora herself, the main character, and she ends up developing really well throughout. So I actually recommend this book. The next book I read was The Deep by River Solomon with David Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. This book is a sci-fi mermaid novella with a person of color main character and love interest. I guess you could also say that the mermaids are gender fluid. They can choose which gender they want to be. So the idea behind this novel is that where pregnant African women on slaving ships bound for the New World were thrown overboard as problematic. So this imagines a world where those women's children actually survived and became a race of mermaids known as the Watanu. The Watanu cannot keep all their memories. It is up to one of them to keep those memories. And she ends up feeling very overwhelmed by the idea, and she gets very tired, and she thinks that she's going to die if she continues being the memory keeper. So while they're in the midst of their remembering ceremony, she leaves. And she's forced to confront her ideas of self and of community and what it means to remember, and whether sometimes the painful memories are worth keeping. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It's weird, it's really hard hitting, but it's very, very good. The fourth book I read in May was 1984 by George Orwell. I vaguely remember reading this book when I was younger, but this was the first time I have read it and remembered it. So this tells the story of a dystopian world where Big Brother has created an almost communist type system where there are no laws, but there is thought crime. And it was good for what it was. It was kind of terrifying in the world that we live in, but I didn't really find the main character likable. I didn't find the love interest likable. I didn't really enjoy this book per se, but I think that it's an important read. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read... Hi everybody. So this is Mariah from the future, the Mariah that's about to edit the video that you've been watching. So this segment, this portion of it, was supposed to be talking about H.P. Lovecraft and how I read H.P. Lovecraft, and I decided that that's a little tone deaf for what is going on in the world right now. So instead, I was up until 2 a.m. last night finding something that I could read by a black author that highlighted something that I felt was important during this time. It was harder than I thought it would be. I'm not gonna lie. And I settled on the trilogy March, which you should be seeing right here. This March, book 1, 2, and 3 are what I read to highlight a black author, and that black author was John Lewis, who was a member of the Civil Rights Movement and one of the leaders of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. He was at Selma, he was at Birmingham, he worked with 2 other men to create this comic book series. They're hefty graphic novel series. They're over 100 pages each. And it's hard to read. It was really hard to read. Not because the writing style was wrong. And not because the words they used were big or pedantic or anything. It was hard to read because it was the truth. And it details his story from the early 1960s, late 1950s, early 1960s, with a brief prelude about his life and how he joined the Civil Rights Movement, to the passing of when President Johnson passed the 1965 Voting Rights Amendment. 1965 Voting Rights Amendment. I'm just gonna let that sit there. No. So, one of the things that really struck me was the fact that he didn't try to hide behind, look how much progress we've made. Instead, he talks about what happened. And let me tell you, I can't properly express what that was like to read. You should read it. I thought it was really enlightening. I don't want to say it was great because it was a hard read, but it was really enlightening, and you understand why protesters are so frustrated when things that were echoed in the time of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis are being echoed in the streets of today. Read it. I gave each volume 4 out of 5 stars. Not for anything that was wrong, just because I need some time to percolate it in my brain and just let that sink. If you have any more diverse reads that you think I should pick up, please leave them down below. I thought I knew about the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, I took history. And I was wrong. So here I am, sitting here with my mead, no makeup on, sitting here with a Doctor Who sweatshirt on, my pin collection in the back. This is my desk, ladies and gentlemen. I was wrong. And I thought the Civil Rights Movement had made great advancements for our country and for people in general. And I was wrong. I read all 3 graphic novels between last night and today. That's what I spent the day doing. And the speeches that they were giving, the things that the civil rights activists were working for, were things that I am hearing echoed in the streets. And what I mean by that is, if you are If you are a minority in today's America, you're automatically at a disadvantage, and it's 2020. I am pasty white. This is actual light reflecting off of my skin. And I know that this may make people uncomfortable and that I may lose subscribers, and if you're going to unsubscribe from me for standing up for basic human rights, then unsubscribe from me now. This isn't going away, and it's not going to go away. There's only so much I can say on any social media platform due to my work. But what I can say is this. I promise in the future to diversify my reading and to fix my own gaps in knowledge. I'm not going to rely on a system that systematically oppresses people to teach me what I need to know about the history of those people. I can't fix the world by myself, but I'm sure as hell not going to be part of the problem. And I'm sorry to all of you. It's not my fault implicitly, but it's people who look like me that did it, and I'm sorry. Back to your regular scheduled programming. The next book I read was Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This is a memoir / self-help book that he put together, and David Goggins is an ultra athlete. He is a retired Naval SEAL chief and had the world record for the largest number of pull-ups in 24 hours. This was, for me, let me start this out by saying, I grew up in a very tough love family. And since then, even as an adult, I've been surrounded by people who believe tough love, including the way David Goggins frames everything and how he talks to himself and how he talks to the people around him, is a completely acceptable way of doing things. This book does not offend me. However, if you have a problem with profanity, if you have a problem with very serious tough love, David Goggins is not for you. This is definitely not the book for you if you are at all worried about negative self-talk or somebody speaking to you as if you were an idiot. Just throwing that out there now. Overall, I really enjoyed this, however, because it is a very motivating story. It's his challenges. There's a challenge after the end of every chapter. So he tells his story throughout the chapter, and then he challenges you to take one of the lessons that he learned from that story or from that chapter of his life and apply it to your life. I really enjoyed that about this, and it really motivated me to get back on the path for some of my personal projects, including my professional goals. Oh, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next I read The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. This tells the story of a girl named Wren and a map maker who stumbles upon her village. Wren is the local gravedigger, and she's been fighting essentially zombies that come out of the forest known as the Bone Houses. Nobody knows, there are legends as to why the Bone Houses are there, but nobody knows why all of a sudden they're coming into the village and attacking. This was fantastic. I gave this 5 stars. I very rarely give 5 stars for anything. This was very nostalgic for me. It reminded me a lot of the story of the Black Cauldron, and it had Welsh myth bases and Welsh spellings throughout it, which I absolutely adored. I think the Welsh folklore is very, very underrepresented. And it is also very realistic to the way I think that a relationship develops. Rin is responsible for a lot of her, or Rin is responsible for her siblings as well. She has a brother and a sister. And you can see that she carries around a lot of guilt for not being able to give them the life that she thinks that they should live. And I have 3 younger sisters, and that really touched me. Like I said, I tore through this book. I was reading 100 pages at a time, and it was a really fascinating take on the legend and the myths of the Cauldron of Rebirth. This had everything I could possibly want. It had a solid romance, a solid friendship, mythology, folklore, an undead goat. I didn't know I needed an undead goat in my life, but apparently I did. So, highly, highly, highly recommend. Maddie at the Book Pusher also just reviewed this in her most recent reads. Alright, the next book on my TBR was Amber and Dusk by Lyra Celine. I DNF'd this book, so I'm not going to give it a star rating. I don't think that's fair, considering I didn't finish it. There are multiple books this year that I have hated the beginnings of and ended up giving 4 stars. I got to page 99 of this, and I knew I couldn't continue. The writing is beautiful, although overly flowery at times. The world concept is very interesting. The main character is my problem, and the lack of world building. Lyra Celine introduces a lot of world building ideas. Multiple races, a very French influenced idea, the Empress lives in this beautiful castle. Let me get to the summary and I'll come back to that. This tells the story of a girl named Sylvie who has what's called a legacy, which means she's able to do magic, and her magic is she's able to summon illusions. She is determined to get to the court of the Amber Empress in the Amber City, which is the center, and she ends up getting swept up in court politics and a lot of tropes right there. She has she was abandoned as a child. She was raised separated and was teased for how powerful she was. Every trope that I could think of is in this book. Every single one. Orphan, chosen one, enemies to lovers, entitlement, and that was my biggest thing. I don't mind tropes. I mind entitled main characters who are just thrust into the action and thrust into the spotlight, and are both. She flops between being so self-deprecating and then saying, no, I deserve this. I deserve to be here. And within just the 100 pages that I read, she was already in the palace. And it's just, there was no, oh, she's working to get to the palace. No, she was there. The Empress allowed her to join the court provisionally as part of a cruel bet. I didn't dislike this book on its principle. I don't dislike the tropes in the book. I disliked the main character, and for me, that sort of self-entitlement is a huge turnoff for a book, especially when there is no other build up to it. There wasn't an explanation as to why she thought she deserved that. She was just given that. And she was presented with this overinflated self-entitlement when she was supposedly raised by nuns. It made no sense to me. If this is your favorite book, I'm really sorry that I disagree with you. I'm really happy that you enjoyed it. It's a beautiful cover. I just wanted more from this than it could deliver. The next book I read was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is a weird mix of fantasy and self-help. It's 174 pages. It's not very long. I struggled to get through it because it's written as if it was a fairy tale, but it's also, I realize there is a lot of controversy around the author. I wouldn't recommend this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was just meh, middle of the road. There is nothing that I really took away from it. I realize that this has an extremely high rating, and it's considered one of the, in multiple lists, of the top 100 books that you should read before you die. I took nothing from this book. It tells the story of a shepherd who decides that he has a recurring dream that there is treasure in the treasure that is waiting for him in the pyramids of Egypt. He's in Spain. So he decides he's going to take a ship and he's going to go to the pyramids, and then it's a very odd book, and I don't recommend it. Again, if this is, like I said, it has a very high rating on Goodreads. Several of my friends have given it 5 stars. I just found it meh. The characters were meh. There was no real build-up. There was no real... I didn't emotionally connect with it at all. Again, these are my thoughts. I know that this is an unpopular opinion. What can I say? Next, I read American Vampire, Volume 1. This is a horror comic that Stephen King helped collaborate on, and it was fantastic. It follows 2 main characters, or 2 storylines, I should say, 2 main storylines. There's the storyline of Pearl in the 1920s, and there's the storyline of Skinner Sweet, who is a outlaw in the Wild West. These 2 storylines do converge. They're not as different as you would think. And the idea is that vampires exist. The main idea is that vampires exist and that they are doing secret machinations behind everything, and that there's a new breed of vampire, the American vampire, and there's only 2 of them, Skinner Sweet and Pearl. This does have, this is very gory. It is kind of scary at times and kind of gross at times, but I thought it was definitely worth the read if you don't mind those ideas from among Stephen King's books. Next, I read the first volume of DC Comics' Constantine, Volume 1, The Spark and the Flame. I really enjoyed this. It's a DC comic, so it's kind of cheesy at times. We kind of just get dropped in the middle. But it did have one of my all-time favorite superheroes, Zatanna, in it, and it really shows why Constantine is equally an amazing character and a really unlikable character. It's a quick read. The artwork is beautiful, but if you liked the TV show Constantine, this might be for you. If you liked the darker aspect of the TV show and not the more humorous aspect, then you should go with Vertigo Comics Constantine, not DC Comics Constantine, if that makes sense. Comic book arcs, what can I say? Finally, I read Break Your Glass Slippers by Amanda Lovelace. This book just came out. It's her newest poetry collection. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't connect with this one as much as I had her previous ones, but the concept was still very sound. It's about self-love and body positivity and getting past toxic relationships, both romantic and not so much platonic, but romantic and familial, as well as learning to rely on yourself and your friends and seeing those ideas. So, that was all 12 books I read in May. Again, I'm really sorry if you disagree with any of my opinions on this book. These are my personal opinions. I don't reflect anything negative on you or your taste in books or weird. Everybody's different and everybody's opinion is valuable. I hope that this brings some discussion to the world and that it helps brighten up your day a little bit, especially with everything that is going on in our world right now. Please stay safe. Please be very careful. And I wish I could say more, but I can't. So I will see you guys next week with a very exciting video, Tag Thursday, which I know it's Tag Tuesday, but I do my videos on Thursday. If you want more content from me in the meantime, please check out my Bookstagram. It's linked down below. My blog for even more book talk because, you know, obviously you're not getting enough of this space. And I really hope that you guys have a great rest of your week. Bye.